When the embroidery comes out of the machine, you get something that looks like this, a whole bunch of colored lines that are forming borders. And we're going to use those borders to position and form the shape of our ribbon that falls into them. Before I do that, I am going to find the one border that is unbroken on the outside, and I am going to stitch around it with my sewing machine. With this yellow line, it's going to be difficult to see, and it's going to be difficult to distinguish once I've sewn all my ribbons in place, because there will be a lot of lines. So before I do any ribbon application, I'm going to follow this border with just a straight stitch on my sewing machine with a color thread that contrasts with it. This is yellow, I'm going to use red. The reason you want to stitch this border now is you want a border that contrasts with all the other stitches that you've done. I have sewn this sample in contrasting color in the bobbin to show you all the threads that are on the back. The gray ones are the ones I use when embroidering, the red ones distinctive, and eventually I'm going to use that to guide me in cutting out the hexagon to the correct shape to finish the pincushion. Each border represents the shape and position of red ribbon used for the pincushion. So I already trimmed the first edge on an angle, and if I position it over top of the border, I can see that I have to cut another angle over on this side to get the ribbon to be the size and shape of the border. So this fits in the border now. Use this ribbon as a guide to cut the remaining 5 pieces that will form the interior border of the ribbon rosebud. The ribbons of this layer should be identical in size, so I'm simply going to use this as a guide. Now notice how I flip the ribbon, and that is because the velvet does not have to go all one way in this project. As a matter of fact, it has more depth and more interest if you flip it, because that'll give it the feeling of different colors, even though they'll just be slightly different. So altogether, I need 6 pieces of ribbon cut in this size and shape. We still require more ribbon pieces to be cut. Before I do that, I'm just going to position the first 6 ribbons without stitching them to preview what's going to happen next. So my first ribbon I position, but I don't sew it in place. I always pin it, and I'll show you why in a little bit. The next ribbon I'm going to sew, because I'm moving counterclockwise, is going to fall into this yellow border. Before I talk about that, I just want to briefly have you look at this multicolored border that travels all around the heart in the middle. If the ribbon's correctly positioned, it should hit this border. This border is sewn with very big stitches, and it will be easy to remove the stitches if you must do that. When this ribbon crosses a border, like this green one, if I begin my stitches kind of close to the border and do all my back stitching here, none of those stitches will show, providing they don't go across the border. I also really don't need to hold all of this ribbon in place, and I'm going to go back and trim some of it. So I want to start with my stitches really close to one of the multicolored stitches bordering the heart. Then I'm going to sew down with a regular stitch length to the bottom and back stitch at the bottom. All my stitches are positioned at the transition point where the fluffy part of the velvet becomes a smooth satin finished edge. Once that ribbon is sewn in place, I'm going to position my next ribbon so it overlaps it, do the same thing. My next ribbon, follow the same guides, and this ribbon. Now, so far so good. But let me just comment on the last ribbon. If you position the last ribbon in position and sew it down, you'll end up with a triangle here, breaking the over-under positioning of all of our other ribbons. What I do at that point, oops, this should be scooched back. What I do at that point is I unpin the pinned ribbon. I have to hold my hand over these because these all fly off when I do this. Fold it back, and then sew this ribbon in place. When that's complete, I flip this ribbon over top of it and complete the border, making the pattern be consistent. I also want to tell you that you'll see me sew one of these ribbons down. Let's take the first one. I'll sew the ribbon down. I'll kind of flip it over and run my finger underneath it because it's very easy to miss a couple pieces of this ribbon, and frequently you can just go back and reapply your stitches. And then while it's flipped, I'll trim the little edge of the ribbon that's underneath of it to about a quarter of an inch deep. So this way I remove a little bit of the thickness.